Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out the Dwarven Realms of Middle-earth compilation, Tolkien explained by Nerd of the Rings. This was recommended to me by our Prefect Fyr, so big thank you Fyr for this week's recommendation as always. And yeah, the Dwarven Realms of Middle-earth. Haven't really checked out a video of or about the Dwarves of Middle-earth, I should say. More so, we've just heard about them in passing, and more so from the perspective of our heroes, and they've not really been the focus of any of the prior lore videos that we've checked out. So it's going to be interesting to see a video about purely just the dwarves and what role they play in Middle Earth. I know they're obviously great smiths. They've made insane, what would you call it, mountain holdings. And they're capable of a lot of really crazy shit, cracked out shit in the universe of Lord of the Rings. So without any further delay, I say we check this video out. And I have to say too, real quick, all the chapters here seem to be different videos, but they're all on different factions, sub-factions of the dwarves in Middle-earth, which I think is really cool. So we're gonna get a full, I guess, overview of all of the different factions of dwarves in Middle-earth. So that's gonna be awesome to see. If you guys enjoy these reactions, hit that like button, subscribe for more content from me, and of course, leave recommendations down in the comments below. And yeah, if you want me to check out some more Lord of the Rings content, of course, let me know, and yeah, we can absolutely do that. And yeah, without any further delay, I say we get right into this video. We're liked up, captions on, quality 1440p, that's what we love to see. Volume looks good, full screen. And without any further delay, let's get it.
In the early days of the world, Aule created the 7 fathers of the dwarves. Laid to rest across Middle-earth, these dwarves would go on to found mighty kingdoms and realms that would last through the ages. From the ancient home of Durin to newer settlements like Erebor and the Glittering Caves, the mansions and halls of the dwarves left their mark on Middle-earth. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we take a compiled look at the realms of the dwarves. First, we look at the greatest of all dwarven realms in Tolkien's writings, as we venture to the halls of Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm is founded sometime between the years of the trees 1050 and 1250 by Durin the First, the father of the dwarves known as the Longbeards. While Durin would first awake in Mount Gundabad, he would make his way south along the eastern side of the Misty Mountains. Finally, he would arrive at the valley of Azanabuzar. There, he comes to a lake, and peering into it, he sees a crown of 7 stars above his head, and takes this as a good sign. He heads into the mountain and begins to build Khazad-dûm. The lake would come to be known as Kheled Zaram, or the Miramir, and the dwarves would place a great pillar named Durin's Stone near the lake.
I wonder too, real quick, how many like dwarves there were to start here. Like, what was the initial, I guess, expedition? And he said, he used interesting words there. They awoke. So I'm guessing it was kind of like they spawned, for lack of a better word. No, but it's just interesting. Like, how many dwarves were there initially to go and like found this first kingdom and to build it up? I'd assume it'd have to be a sizable number to get any sort of progress done, but again, maybe these ones were just insanely cracked as well. And I don't know too, and I'm sure we're going to find out, magical abilities of the dwarves. I don't believe they really have much, but maybe that will also play a role in this, so I'm going to be interested to see that.
Would place a great pillar named Durin's Stone near the lake in honor of Durin seeing the crown of stars and founding Khazad-dûm. The name Khazad-dûm means Dwarves' Mansion in Khuz-dûl.
Dwarves' Mansion.
And the city would indeed live up to that name. Durin and his people begin digging into the mountain and also build the East Gates, the great eastern doorway into the Dwarven Kingdom. Upon entering the gates, one would come directly into the first hall. From there, one would go through a wide passage and stairs, which lead to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. The bridge is built with defense of the Dwarven realm in mind. It was a narrow walkway that crossed over a great chasm. Should any invading army breach the outer defenses, they would be forced to cross the roughly 50-foot bridge single file, making them incredibly vulnerable to Dwarven attack. Upon crossing the bridge, one would come to the second hall, and onward to the rest of the city. Over the centuries, Durin's folk build Khazad-dûm into an immense city.
I have to say too, just looking at this map, this looks fucking crazy. I've never actually seen any maps of like Tolkien's like dwarven structures. I didn't actually know they existed, but to see that this is actually like laid out, it actually does kind of make sense too. The way it's drawn as well, pretty cracked out, and I can see it actually like keeps going. I wonder how big this actually is if it's like zoomed out all the way. Damn, dude, makes me want to play like Dwarf Fortress or something like that. I've never actually. I used to play really shittily back in the day, the original Dwarf Fortress, but I know it's on Steam now. It makes me want to fucking play some of that game and, you know, dig out my own Dwarf Kingdom. You know, I love the dwarves and I guess typical fantasy. You know what I mean? They're just a very interesting race, and you know, they're rats, they're loot hoarders, and that's kind of, you know, it's kind of your boy over here. So.
Over the centuries, Durin's folk build Khazad-dûm into an immense city made of many chambers, passages, halls, and mines. In total, there were 7 levels of Khazad-dûm going upward and 7 deeps going downward, measured from the base level of the East Gate. The eastern portion of Khazad-dûm is made into the city itself, whereas the expansions going toward the west are mining areas. So great and famous was Durin's realm of Khazad-dûm that even the elves of Beleriand in the First Age had heard of it from the dwarves in the Blue Mountains.
Really?
In addition to their great halls and mines, the dwarves also constructed a tower at the pinnacle of the Silver
Pretty base when you know even the elves
peak
are
of the Misty Mountains, which the dwarves call Xvixxivx.
like prehistoric in a sense
here. It is known
here.
as Durin's Tower,
Not prehistoric,
and could
but
only
you know what
be
I mean.
reached by taking the Endless Stair, which led from the very foundations of the mountain. Having seen the rise of the greatest dwarf kingdom in Middle-earth, Durin I dies sometime before the end of the First Age.
Okay.
After the destruction of Beleriand, most of the dwarves of Nogrod and Belegost leave their ruined homes in the Blue Mountains and join Durin's folk in Khazad-dûm. This has unforeseen benefits for the dwarves of the Misty Mountains. Not only do their numbers swell, but the dwarves of the West bring with them their great skill as blacksmiths and masons.
Okay. So it seems like those dwarves came over from the west here by the shore, by the ocean. It seems that there were like varying Dwarven kingdoms, or at least Dwarven tribes, at this time that were like maybe not necessarily competing with each other, but at least had to have been in contact, unless they just fled over there and they're like, oh shit, there's more dwarves over here. I was under the impression that that was the only Dwarven kingdom, and maybe that was like where all other Dwarven kingdoms kind of came from, but no, it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like they were just kind of scattered across the map, you know, already in a sense. And yeah, I guess these dwarves weren't the best at masonry and smithing, and these, I guess, Blue Mountain dwarves were. Damn.
Durin's folk in Khazad-dûm. This has unforeseen benefits for the dwarves of the Misty Mountains. Not only do their numbers swell, but the dwarves of the West bring with them their great skill as
refugee
blacksmiths
dwarves
and masons. This brings what was already a great dwarven kingdom to new heights, likely the very pinnacle of its history. By this time, Khazad-dûm's mining had expanded the realm to the westernmost part of the Misty Mountains, so that one could travel underground the entire width of the mountains. At the walls of Moria, on its western side, the doors of Durin are built by the 2 greatest craftsmen of the Second Age, the dwarf Narvi and his friend Celebrimbor of Eregion. The West Gate is built sometime between 750 and 1500 of the Second Age. The doors are made so well by Narvi that when closed, they could not be seen as doors, but simply appeared as the side of the mountain. Celebrimbor inlays the design and words of the door with ithildin, a material that could only be seen by reflected starlight and moonlight. Ithildin was created by the elves using Khazad-dûm's most valuable commodity, mithril. Upon the doors were the hammer and anvil, the symbol of Durin.
Isn't that like, they use mithril for a lot of shit, or mithril for a lot of shit, I guess I should say. Isn't that, just trying to recollect from my knowledge of like the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Didn't Frodo have like armor made of mithril? I'm pretty sure, like straight up, and like that like did kind of save his life at some point, if I do recall. Damn.
On the door.
What all did they make out of that? I guess like it wasn't really used for weaponry, was it? Or was it kind of just used for everything? Like a super alloy in a sense. And was it an alloy, or was it its own, like, it just came out of the ground that way, you know what I mean? Or did they mix it to create it, you know what I mean? I guess they must have just found it that way, in a sense.
Khazad-dûm's most valuable commodity.
Yeah, most valuable commodity.
Upon the doors were the hammer and anvil.
It's hard to tell if they
symbol of
made
Durin,
it or if they found it,
a
you know what I
crown
mean?
and 7 stars,
utilized
signifying Durin's crown that led him to found the realm. 2 trees symbolizing the tree of the High Elves, and a single star, which was the emblem of the House of Feanor, Celebrimbor's own family line. In the top left, in Feanor's own Tengwar script,
they were working with the elves
is the letter
as well.
Kalma, or C, for Celebrimbor. In the top right is the letter Ore, or N, for Narvi. And near the base was Ando, or D, for Durin. The inscription, arched across the top, read, Enin Durin, Aran Moria, Pedo Melon Amino, Im Narvi, Hen Ekant, Celebrimbor o Eregion, Teithant Ithuhin. Translated by Gandalf, it read, The doors of Durin, Lord of Moria, speak, friend, and enter. I, Narvi, made them. Celebrimbor of Hollin drew these signs. Little known to Gandalf in the later Third Age, this inscription properly translated was, Say, friend, and enter. For when these doors were made in the Second Age, it was a much more friendly and simpler time. Sauron had not yet caused trouble or made war in Eriador, and the doors themselves typically stood open for free travel and trade between the peoples of the mountain and those of Eregion.
Oh, that's cool.
However, this friendship...
That does make sense. So like, and Gandalf from the Third Age there, he's probably reading that and like obviously interpreting it a lot differently given the state of war and the tumultuous times that they lived in and had to deal with at that point, right? But yeah, during a time of peace and during their creation, yeah, I mean, if the doors were open and free trade, you know, free travel was just allowed, I mean, yeah. Shit, you know, that's pretty cool, you know, and it's cool that there was like that misinterpretation by Gandalf. Like even he isn't necessarily aware of its like true meaning because he wasn't there during that time, right? During its creation.
Between the peoples of the mountain and those of Eregion. However, this friendship and happiness would not last.
Yeah.
For Sauron would come to Eregion. In 1697, Sauron destroys the Elven realm and kills Celebrimbor in his attempt to seize all the rings of power.
Wow.
After the dwarves aid Elrond by attacking Sauron from his rear guard, they retreat into the mountain and close the doors of Durin behind them.
And
from this
never
time on,
open
the
them
doors
again.
of Durin would not be opened from the outside again.
Damn.
Until the Fellowship of the Ring does so in 3019 of the Third Age.
Right,
This
right.
cuts the dwarves off from the elves of Eriador, and the friendship between the races begins to dwindle. It's worth noting that prior to the sack of Eregion, Galadriel and her daughter Celebrian had traveled through Khazad-dûm in order to reach the Elven realm to the east. Thus, they were safe from the war of the elves and Sauron, thanks in part to their dwarven friends. During this time of great upheaval in Eriador, the orcs begin to reinvade the mountains, bringing war to the dwarves and taking possession of Mount Gundabad. While likely not used as a place of residence, Gundabad had been a great meeting place for the houses of the dwarves for many years. Instead, it becomes a stronghold of the orcs,
yeah.
and would even come into play during the Witch King's reign in Angmar. Aside
Right.
from sending troops to aid in the Last Alliance, not much is known about the dwarves' activities in the rest of the Second Age. We know that nearly 2,000 years into the Third Age, the dwarves were still mining ever deeper into the mountain for their precious mithril. It is then, in 1980 of the Third Age,
Yeah, they must just
that
find
the
it like
dwarves'
that.
deep delving awakes a Balrog
It's a mineral.
of Morgoth. The Balrog
Oh.
wreaks havoc upon Khazad-dûm, bringing great destruction and killing King Durin VI, earning its name among the dwarves, Durin's Bane. The dwarves would hold on to the hope of maintaining their home until the following year, when King Nine I was also killed. Defeated, the dwarves flee from their great kingdom and make their way to the northeast.
So straight up, was that Balrog just like buried in a sense, or did they like awaken it? You know what I mean? Like, I guess in a sense, it must have just been like secluded there, because I know the Balrogs work for Sauron, right? In a sense. Or was this just like a fucking, you know, like a naturally occurring one, and they're like, oh, fuck, you know, they woke that fucker from its slumber, and it just decided like, I'm going to live here now, you know? Somebody let me know a little bit more about that, because that's a little interesting. Like, why was that Balrog specifically there? Was it sent by Sauron? Let me know.
The dwarves flee from their great kingdom and make their way to the northeast. It might have already been mentioned, but it's
passing me up, like in a previous video,
the greatest of all Dwarven realms, now stood empty and dark, with a nameless terror lurking in the shadows. It is at this time that the elves around Lorien began calling it by its other name, Moria, the Black Pit.
Damn.
For nearly 500 years, the Balrog was the only known creature to inhabit Moria. Finally, in 2480, the orcs begin to raid the treasuries of the dwarves and occupy the levels and deeps of the city. Over 300 years later, the dwarves, having been driven from Erebor by Smaug, come to make war upon the orcs. 3 years earlier, Thorin's grandfather Thror had traveled with a single companion to the East Gate and entered the mountain alone. The king was killed by the orc chieftain Azog. The decapitated body of Thror was thrown from the gate, with Azog's name branded upon his head.
That's fucked.
After Nar brings word to Thrain, the dwarves assemble an army, even calling the other houses of the dwarves to war. The war of the dwarves and orcs begins, and is fought almost entirely beneath the Misty Mountains.
Damn.
The dwarves attack and sack all the orc holds they could find, one by one, from Gundabad in the...
It's very cool, again, like seeing just inspiration, how it works, right? Warhammer, right? Seeing like, you know, playing some of the Total War Warhammer games, seeing the Underdeep, seeing the fantasy, how all the Dwarven Kingdoms work in that game. It's just cool seeing that inspiration, the original inspiration for all these later works that we do eventually get, and how it comes. Like they're fighting in these massive caverns underneath this mountain range, and that's something that literally happens in fantasy Warhammer all the time. They have specific caverns dug out and used for travel trade, that type of thing. But it's also just like where you can conduct warfare in the actual game itself with orc tribes and whatnot, also using the Underdeep. It's very, very cool that this is like originally where it came from. You know, I just love seeing this shit, and seeing Tolkien and how I need to watch some more documentaries on like Tolkien himself, like the man, right? Because it'd be very interesting to learn more about him and see like the inspiration where he himself came up with a lot of this stuff. And I know a lot of it came from like his home life in England, right? And I know he was also a First War vet, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And he was well educated too, I believe. But I need to look up some more about the man, because like, damn, like what a great mind to come up with all this stuff. And then obviously 100 years later, it's still, you know, the peak. It's still the best, and every other work is still utilizing it to some extent. It's just awesome to see.
All the orc holds they could find, one by one, from Gundabad in the north to the Gladden River in the south. While we don't know much about this underground battle, we know that the dwarves are said to have excelled in combat on their home field of the mines and tunnels. Finally, in 2799, the war comes to an end with the Battle of Azanabalzar. Reinforced by dwarves of the Iron Hills, the dwarves are victorious in a battle that was catastrophic for both sides. In the battle, Dain Ironfoot, with his great red axe, kills Azog.
Damn.
While Thrain wishes to advance into the mountain and reclaim Khazad-dûm, Dain, as well as the dwarves from the other houses than Doran's folk, refused. While the other houses said the city was not of their own fathers, and that they had fulfilled their part by avenging Thror, Dain had caught a glimpse of Doran's bane, and knew the attempt to be futile. While those of Doran's folk would settle.
And I think that's reasonable on their behalf too. Again, if they were called to war to avenge a grudge, quite literally, right? To avenge the death of a family member. I mean, they did that part, but they're not here to throw their own men's lives away, you know, leaving them defenseless. Like, you know, you can't just regrow an army. It just doesn't work like that, right? So yeah, they fulfilled their part. And also, yeah, if you see what's actually down there, if you lay eyes on that Balrog, nah. What are you gonna do? You gonna fight that? Like, come on now. No. No.
And knew the attempt to be futile. While those of Doran's folk would settle in the Blue Mountains or return to the Iron Hills, Moria remains a place of darkness. Sometime between 2845 and 2950, Gandalf would enter the city looking for King Thrain before exiting the West Gate. After the Battle of Five Armies, Doran's folk would not only reclaim Erebor, but the battle would decimate the orcs from the Misty Mountains.
Right.
In 2989, Balin leads an expedition from the Lonely Mountain in an attempt to reclaim their greatest realm. Thanks in large part to the Battle of Five Armies, Balin's quest is initially a success.
Yeah.
They kill a large number of orcs and take control of the eastern halls of Khazad-dûm. They reclaim many lost treasures, including Durin's axe, an heirloom of their people. For 5 years, Balin serves as Lord of Moria. However,
That's
on
crazy.
November 10th,
Good for him,
2994,
but it doesn't work,
Balin
does it?
travels alone to the Miramir, the very lake Durin himself once gazed upon. There he is shot by an orc archer. Though the archer was slain, it was only one of many. An army of orcs comes up the Silver Lode.
Imagine he gets assassinated by an orc, bro. That's how he goes out? Really? He gets shot by an orc archer. He gets fucking assassinated. Bro, that's... Reclaiming Moria, Lord of Moria once more, and he goes out like that? Fuck.
Of many.
It's depressing, man,
An
but
army of orcs
happens,
comes up
right?
the Silver Lode
smart
and
by the
attacks
orcs.
the colony of the dwarves. The orcs force their way into Khazad-dûm, and a great battle ensues in the second hall. Some of the dwarves are killed in the hall, as the others retreat all the way up to the 7th level. Balin's body is placed in a tomb in the chamber of Mazarbul, the very chamber where he had set up his throne. With their lord dead and defeat drawing near, a group of dwarves, including Owen, make their way to the West Gate. There they find the water all the way up to the walls, and the Watcher in the water kills Owen, and escape is impossible. The remaining dwarves, including Ori, make a final stand in the chamber of Mazarbul. They are overrun, and none survive. Moria would remain silent, and the fate of Balin's colony would remain a mystery until the Fellowship of the Ring passes through Khazad-dûm in January 3019. Though it is of interest to note that at some point prior to the Fellowship, Aragorn had entered Moria for an unknown reason.
Oh, really?
After escaping the Watcher themselves, the Fellowship makes its way through the western portion of the realm.
So the Watcher's Pool, I think I vaguely remember that thing, if I recall. And I vaguely remember it, I think, honestly, from one of the video games. I want to say on the original Xbox, bro. That's going way back. But what exactly is a Watcher, and what exactly, where does it come from? You know what I mean? Like, what's its piece? Obviously, it's killing dwarves and it's targeting everybody, it seems like. So I'm guessing it's just kind of like a neutral evil entity, for lack of a better word. But somebody let me know a little bit more about Watchers, like the Watcher's Pool, and like exactly what that is, you know? Themselves,
the Fellowship makes its way through the western portion of the realm. During their venture, Pippin drops a stone into a well, which falls a great distance until a small plink could be heard. giving us a sense of the immense depth of Khazad-dûm. The sound is answered by a series of hammering noises, almost as if in communication or warning. This leads to Gandalf's Fool of a Took rebuke of Pippin. The Fellowship eventually makes its way up to the 7th level of Moria, and to the very chamber of Mazarbul, where they discover the book that would tell them the history of Balin's colony. As we know, the Fellowship would come under attack by orcs and trolls before the identity of Durin's Bane is finally revealed. Gandalf fights the Balrog upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm, destroying a section of the bridge itself in order to plunge the Balrog into the depths below. While Gandalf would also fall, the remainder of the Fellowship escapes through the East Gate to the Dimral Dale. Despite their grief and their haste, Gimli takes a moment to see Kheled Zaram with his own eyes. Taking Frodo with him, they gaze into the Miramir. As the Fellowship makes its way to Lothlorien, Gandalf would pursue the Balrog up the Endless Stair on January 23rd. After fighting upon the Silvertine for 2 days, Gandalf finally defeats his enemy. In the battle, the tower itself is destroyed, and the entrance to the stairway is blocked, leaving Gandalf.
It's crazy to me how like Gandalf actually fights this motherfucker off. Like he actually just engages in mortal fucking combat with this Balrog, dude. Like, bruh, that's actually just so base to me.
Itself is
also,
destroyed,
that was a cool illustration
and the entrance
before.
to the stairway is blocked, leaving Gandalf stranded atop the mountain. During the journey through Moria, Gimli sings the Song of Durin, which describes the history of Khazad-dûm. The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen, no words were laid on stream or stone, when Durin woke and walked alone. He named the nameless hills and dells, he drank from yet untasted wells, he stooped and looked in Miramir, and saw a crown of stars appear, as gems upon a silver thread, above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was on carven throne, in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon, in shining lamps of crystal hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, there shone forever, fair and bright. Their hammer on the anvil smote, their chisel clove and graver wrote, their forged was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mined, the mason built, their barrel, pearl and opal pale, and metal wrought like fish's mail, buckler and corset, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountains music woke, the harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. The world is grey, the mountains old, the forge's fire is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls, the darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria, in Khazad-dûm. But still the sunken stars appear, in dark and windless Miramir. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. With Sauron's defeat at the end of the Third Age, combined with the earlier death of the Balrog,
that was an interesting tune,
much
I'm not
darkness
gonna lie.
had been driven from the world. Eventually, the time
and
for the
I find
dwarf-
too more songs in quotation marks in Lord of the Rings. It's less song, more story, but I guess that makes sense. Like that's kind of just like oral tradition, I suppose, in a sense. They can put it into like tune, I suppose, but it's more just the sense of how do we portray like events past, you know what I mean? without like necessarily writing or having access to writing, because they're using runes and shit like that, right? And obviously this is tales that have been passed down, right? That they might not have always had a chance to write down, like how much of this was chronicled and how much of this was like seen by actual dwarves and told to the generations past, and passed on, whatever have you, right? So it's very interesting that like a lot of like dwarven music that I've seen, and I haven't seen a lot, to be fair, but it's more just like story based more than it is like song based. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Much darkness had been driven from the world. Eventually, the time for the dwarves to retake Moria once and for all would finally come. Sometime after the year 171 of the Fourth Age, Durin VII, a descendant of Dain Ironfoot, and believed to be the sixth reincarnation of Durin himself, would rise to the kingship of Durin's folk. In his reign, he would lead a final, successful return of the dwarves to Khazad-dûm. It is said that the House of Durin reclaimed their inheritance, and until the day when the race of dwarves itself should end, their hammers would ring in their great halls beneath the misty mountains, in Moria, in Khazad-dûm. Next we look to some of the earliest dwarves, exiles from the other realms, who would come into great conflict with elves and men. They are the petty dwarves.
The petty dwarves.
The seven fathers of the dwarves awoke sometime after the awakening of the elves, which was long before the First Age. Durin establishes Khazad-dûm. 4 dwarf fathers awake in the east, and the remaining 2 awake in the Blue Mountains, founding Nogrod and Belagost. But there would be an 8th group of dwarves that would enter into the story of Middle-earth only in these early days. These dwarves were outcasts from the other clans. Many were fugitives due to their own evil deeds. Others left or were driven out from the communities, being deformed or undersized, or slothful and rebellious. It is said that long before the return of Morgoth, that would come at the beginning of the First Age, these outcast dwarves wandered westward into Beleriand. They become diminished in both stature and in smithcraft, and take to living lives of stealth. They were the first of all dwarves to cross the Blue Mountains into Beleriand, and before the elves arrived, they established the strongholds of Nulukizdin and Sharbund. Due to their early arrival in Beleriand, these dwarven outcasts were the first dwarves the elves would meet. In the Silmarillion,
That's so interesting. So these, I guess these petty dwarves were cast out for a number of reasons, potentially. Either they were criminals, deformed, just, slothful, lazy, whatever have you, rebellious for dwarves. They didn't want them there. So they set out, actually created their own strongholds, these refugees, and these were actually the first dwarves that elves actually communicated with. Was technically the reprobates from like the actual main dwarven communities. That's not great. I'm not gonna lie, that's a bad first impression potentially. Let's see.
Dwarven outcasts were the first dwarves the elves would meet. In the Silmarillion, we are told that the elves, not knowing what these creatures were, hunted and killed the dwarves. Only after realizing they were beings of intelligence and not mere beasts did they leave them alone. However, in the History of Middle-earth volume, The War of the Jewels, we see some of Tolkien's writings that may indicate both dwarves and elves were in the wrong. First, we learn that the elves seldom caught sight of the dwarves in clear light. In this version, it is said the Eldar only found out about them when the dwarves attacked by stealth at night. Believing them to be animals, the Sindar elves called them Levain ta Dail, which means two-legged animals. Later, they would be called Noigith Nibin, and ever after, they are known as the Petty Dwarves. Despite the fact that the dwarves of the other clans did not think highly of the Petty Dwarves, they harbored ill will toward the elves for having hunted and slain their lesser kin. This grievance would be put aside.
That just seems like a fucking casus belli, like waiting. Like, so the dwarves like send all their reprobates out, get the fuck out of here, we don't want you. And then when they get like hunted and killed by this new race, those evil pointy ears, they're fucking killing our people. Oh, I can't believe they do such a heinous act, as like you cast them out and like sent them to die, and they just didn't. And now suddenly you got like a Jadur cause, like Casus Belli, fucking to declare war on the elves and hate them. Fuck, that's a joke. That's some IRL shit right there.
For having hunted and slain their lesser kin. This grievance would be put aside as the dwarves of the Blue Mountains would make treaties with the Sindar, in part because the petty dwarves had attacked the elves in ambush and never declared themselves to the elves. However, the petty dwarves themselves would hold a hatred for all elves so long as their race would endure. One of the earlier mentioned dwellings of the dwarves, Nulukizdin, is where Galadriel's brother Finrod would come seeking to establish a stronghold at the behest of Ulmo. Even by this time, in 52 of the First Age, it is believed the petty dwarves had begun to dwindle in number. They feign friendship with Finrod and help him to build the realm of Nargothrond in exchange for generous reward. However, in an act of treachery, their chieftain Mim would attempt to murder Finrod in his sleep. This failed attempt would lead to the elves driving out all the petty dwarves.
Kill them
Their only
all.
remaining dwelling place is Sharbund, also known as Amon Ruth, the Bald Hill. We are told the petty dwarves love none but themselves, and while they feared and hated the orcs, they hated the elves no less. Above all, they hate the Noldor, for they saw them as usurpers who had stolen their lands and homes. Over the centuries, the petty dwarves would continue to dwindle, until at last, only 3 would remain: Mim and his sons Ibun and Him. These 3 would enter into the story of Turin Turambar in 486 of the First Age, when Turin's outlaws discover them one night in the wilderness. They capture Mim, and an archer shoots an arrow at his sons as they flee. Mim agrees to take the men to his home, a place where Turin's company could live without fear of being found by Morgoth's forces. Mim takes them to Amanruth, but now calls it Bar and Danweth, the House of Ransom. They arrive to find Him has been killed by the arrow shot by the archer. Turin's genuine remorse at the loss of Mim's son earns some measure of respect from the dwarf, though Mim would pronounce a curse upon Androg, the archer who had loosed the arrow.
You speak like a dwarf lord of old, and at that I marvel. Now my heart is cooled, though it is not glad. My own ransom I will pay, therefore you may dwell here if you will. But this I will add, he that loosed the shaft shall break his bow and his arrows, and lay them at my son's feet, and he shall never take arrow nor bear bow again. If he does, he shall die by it. That curse I lay on him.
Androg was afraid.
I could just see, like, he goes to, like, draw the... Hold on, it's like he goes to, like, draw the fucking bow back, and it just, like, shoots, like, straight 180 degrees, like, back at him and fucking kills him, like, if he goes to shoot another arrow. Like, what the fuck? What kind of wretched curse is this, dude? But yeah, you don't want to mess around with no curses, especially in Lord of the Rings, I find. Usually they are true. I'm not sure what, like, actually causes curses, and what, like, the actual lore is behind them. Like, is it just enough, like, a fucking willpower, enough, like, desire, hate, potentially, you know what I mean? Enough of a certain emotion to will that thing into being, potentially. Somebody let me know a little bit more about that. But yeah, also I don't really feel bad for this guy, because again, he was a petty dwarf. It was just him and his sons left, so he apparently led his fucking kingdom into depravity and ruined it. And also, this guy did try to backstab, like, initially too. He's a rat, you know what I mean? I don't really feel bad for him.
That curse I lay on him.
Androg was afraid when he heard of this curse, and though he did so with great grudge, he broke his bow and his arrows and laid them at the dead dwarf's feet. But as he came out from the chamber, he glanced evilly at Mim and muttered, "The curse of a dwarf never dies, they say, but a man's too may come home.
May he die with a dart in his throat.
As the story unfolds, it seems as though a friendship may develop between Torren and Mim. Throughout the coming winter, Torren would sit for many long hours listening to the dwarf's lore and tales of his long life. However, the arrival of an old friend of Torren's would ignite an old hatred in Mim. For Beleg Strongbow, one of the greatest elves of the age, would finally locate his friend and would stay for a time in Baran Dunwaith. The dwarf despises the elf and resents his friendship with Torren. His hatred only grows when Beleg heals Androg from a poisoned arrow wound, thwarting Mim's curse, at least for the time being. One night, Mim and Ibun are captured by orcs. Mim would betray Torren's company, though he would request that Torren himself not be slain.
Dude, that's that's like fucking like, oh my god, that's like workers in Civilization, dude. You know what I mean? Those fuckers on like auto build, they'll just run into barbarian units and get captured. It's like, yeah, you trying to get captured, you fucks? Seems like it, dude. Like straight up, they're trying to leave your empire, but they're not trying to like, you know, they're not trying to let you know that they're trying to leave. Ugh. Hate that, man. It's annoying. That's literally what this guy did. He just fucking turned himself in.
Though he would request that Torren himself not be slain. We are never told what becomes of Ibun, though it is possible he was killed by these very orcs, or in some later mishap. Thus, guided by Mim, the orcs come to the secret dwelling and destroy the company. Androg is once again hit with an arrow, and though mortally wounded, his last act would be to cut Beleg from his bonds. Torren is captured and taken away, and Mim is left behind. And at length, when all was silent again, Mim crept out of the shadows of his house. And as the sun rose over the mists of Sirion, he stood beside the dead men on the hilltop. But he perceived that not all those that lay there were dead, for by one his gaze was returned, and he looked in the eyes of Beleg the elf. Then with hatred long stored, Mim stepped up to Beleg, and drew forth the sword Anglakel, that lay beneath the body of one that had fallen beside him. But Beleg, stumbling up, seized back the sword and thrust it at the dwarf. And Mim, in terror, fled wailing from the hilltop. And Beleg cried after him, "The vengeance of the House of Hador will find you yet." Years later, in 495...
He got away. That little rat dwarf got away, dude. He tried to fucking kill him. He he literally went up to the battle site, attempted to fucking finish the deed on this elf. And then when the elf woke up mid-swing, he's like, he tried to defend himself. He just instantly fucking ran away. He didn't even fight. He's like, curses be, he's still alive. He can fight back. Mercy, mercy, please. And he just fled. What a fucking rat. I hope that guy gets his, dude.
House of Hador will find you yet. Years later, in 495 of the First Age, the realm of Nargothrond would fall to the dragon Glaurung, thanks in part to the folly of Torren himself. 4 years later, Glaurung would seek out Torren in his new home of Brethil, but the man would finally kill the dragon. With Nargothrond now in a ruined state, with no dragon, orcs, or elves inhabiting it, Mim makes his way to his former home, seeking its treasure for himself. In 502, Torren's father Hurin has been released from his captivity by Morgoth, and after 2 years of travel and finding the grave of his children and burying his wife, Hurin comes to Nargothrond. Mim the petty dwarf had found his way to Nargothrond and crept within the ruined halls, and he took possession of them and sat there fingering the gold and the gems, letting them run ever through his hands, for none came nigh to despoil him, from dread of the spirit of Glaurung and his very memory. But now one had come and stood upon the threshold, and Mim came forth and demanded to know his purpose. But Hurin said, "Who are you that would hinder me from entering the house of Finrod Felagund?" Then the dwarf answered,
"I am Mim, and before the proud ones came over the sea, dwarves delved the halls of Nolokisdin. I have but returned to take what is mine, for I am the last of my people. Then you shall enjoy your inheritance no longer, said Hurin. For I am Hurin, son of Galdor, returned out of Angband, and my son was Turin Turambar, whom you have not forgotten. And he it was that slew Glaurung the dragon, who wasted these halls where you now sit. And not unknown is it to me by whom the dragon helm of Dorlomin was betrayed. Then Mim, in great fear, besought Hurin to take what he would, but to spare his life.
Oh my god, dude, what a rat! What a rat! This is my home. You get out of here. We dealt here first. This is my home. I'm simply here to take what is mine. You're a peasant. You betrayed the last guy that lived here. You fucking suck as a ruler. Your people are dead. Also, the only reason you're here is because my son slew the dragon that lived here. You're a peasant. Mercy! Mercy! Please don't kill me! You're right! Just let me leave with my life! Like, what the fuck? This guy's pathetic, dude. This guy is actually fucking pathetic.
Fear besought Hurin to take what he would, but to spare his life. But Hurin gave no heed to his prayer,
I don't care.
and
Just
slew
let
him
me
there
live.
before the doors of Nargothrond.
Good.
Thus the vengeance of the House of Hador is
Killed him right
delivered,
there. Like,
and the
nah.
race of the petty dwarves is no more.
Thank God.
We are told that Mim was old
World's
even
better
in
off
the
for it.
reckoning of other dwarves. Between the founding of Nargothrond and his death in 502, some 450 years pass. While nowhere close to the nearly 2,400 years Durin the First lived in Khazad-dûm,
Jesus.
there are no other named dwarves that we know for certain to live longer than Mim. The closest
Hey, he
would
lived a
likely be
long-ass time.
Dwalin from Thorin's company, who would live to be 340 years old. Mim the Petty Dwarf is also unique among Tolkien characters, for he has an entire poem and an accompanying prose text written by J.R.R. Tolkien that has never been released.
Really?
Well, to be more accurate, it's never been released in English. The text is known as The Complaint of Mim the Dwarf, and was published just once, in an obscure German book from the late 1970s. While
Really?
the original English text has not been released to this very day, we know that the poem consists of 26 lines of verse, and there are 6 paragraphs of prose which follow. According to Hammond and Skull's Tolkien Companion and Guide, it is a tale about an aging Mim, lonely and bitter, and how he struggles with not being able to forgive. Mim's life, like the lives of his people, would be one of great tragedy, some inflicted by others, and some self-wrought. And while there would be
Most
no
self-wrought.
shortage of hostility
From the sounds of
between
it.
the races of Middle-earth in the centuries to come, there were few beings who could harbor hatred like the petty dwarves. Next, we travel to one of the earliest but lesser-known realms of the dwarves, and the very first location of Durin, Mount Gundabad. The mountain of Gundabad lies in the far north of the Misty Mountains, where the arid Mithrin, or Grey Mountains, meet the Hithyglir. After the dwarves are created by Aule and given true life by Iluvatar, they are set to lie in sleep until the awakening of the elves. 2 of the fathers are placed in the Blue Mountains, 4 are placed in the east, and 1 is placed in Mount Gundabad. Sometime around the years of the trees 1150, Durin wakes from his slumber. However, he would not remain in Gundabad. Rather, he travels south along the Misty Mountains, where no mortal had yet traveled, naming the nameless hills and dells, drinking from yet untasted wells. Durin would establish the great dwarven realm of Khazad-dûm, many miles south of Gundabad. However, the northern mountain would remain a place of great importance for the dwarves. In the peoples of Middle-earth, we learn that while the Firebeards and Broadbeams in the Blue Mountains, and the Ironfists and Stiffbeards, and Blacklocks and Stonefoots in the east, are quite far from the Longbeards, that is, Durin's folk, all 7 kindreds were in communication with one another, and in the early ages they would often hold assemblies of delegates at none other than Mount Gundabad. And in times of great need, Even the most distant dwarf clans would send help to their kinsmen.
Which is very based for the dwarves, I have to say, to actually be in like full communication potentially with all houses or clans within your race, I guess, so that you can like actually mobilize, help each other out as like as a unified race. Because again, like they're not, I'm sure there's like clan disputes and whatever have you, right, and house disputes, faction disputes, but at least they're all willing to help each other out for the betterment of their cause, right, for lack of a better word. They will help each other out for those reasons, which is pretty based. And I think they're one of the few races that actually have complete communication amongst them like that, right?
Even the most distant dwarf clans would send help to their kinsmen, as we'll see later in the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. While this would remain a location of great reverence among the dwarves, there is no mention within Tolkien's writings of this being a place of permanent residence for their kind. Gundabad is next mentioned about midway through the Second Age. After Sauron conquers Eregion in 1697, his attempt at destroying Elrond's host is thwarted when the dwarves attack his rear flank, allowing Elrond to escape and establish Imladris in the north. Sauron's forces drive the dwarves back, but once the doors of Durin are closed, Khazad-dûm is impenetrable. Sauron, enraged at this development in the war, commands his orcs to attack the dwarves wherever they could be found. While much about the coming days focuses on the siege of Imladris and Sauron's advances toward Gil-galad and Lindon, the orcs would also carry out their orders from the setback at Khazad-dûm. Thus comes the first sacking of Gundabad, where the orcs invade the mountain, driving off any dwarves and infesting not only Gundabad itself, but the Grey Mountains as well. Not only does this mean that Gundabad is now under enemy control, but their invasion of the Grey Mountains cuts off any communication between Khazad-dûm and their settlement in the Iron Hills in the east.
I see.
As for Gundabad, this holy site for the dwarves would become a stronghold of the orcs for well over 4,000 years.
That's
for
crazy.
For many long years, these orcs would not trouble.
See, I won't lie, I thought Gundabad originally was an orc settlement because of just, I guess, the occupation. It's always referred to as being in orc hands. But no, originally founded by the dwarves, they just occupied it for fucking ever, apparently. They took it over, and I guess the dwarves, just for one reason or another, didn't mobilize the force to take it back, or the orcs were just straight up just too dug in to actually get it out, or to get it back again. That's crazy. That's such a long time period to take it over and occupy it for.
4,000 years. For many long years, these orcs would not trouble the elves and men of the north, for they had a great fear of the elves in particular, and would flee from elves and dared not approach the dwellings of men. In the nature of Middle-earth, we are told that when the greater part of the strength of the elves and men is drawn away south to the war with Mordor, that is, the War of the Last Alliance, the orcs become more bold. Their scattered tribes band together and dig a deep stronghold beneath Gundabad and slowly begin creeping southward. Soon enough, these very orcs would be put to use by one of Sauron's servants. 3,000 years after the orcs first took Gundabad, the Lord of the Nazgul comes to the north of Middle-earth, establishing a new realm to rival the mannish kingdom of Arnor. Thus, the kingdom of Angmar rises. While the battles of Angmar would take place on the western side of the Misty Mountains, its lands stretch to the eastern side as well. In the west, the Witch King establishes the fortress and capital of Carn-dûm, balancing the eastern fortress of Gundabad. During a period of nearly 700 years, the Witch King would wage war against the men of Arnor, leading to its division and ultimately its downfall. While the Witch King would succeed in destroying the Northern Kingdom, Angmar itself is destroyed in 1975 of the Third Age, at the hands of Arnor's allies, Gondor and Rivendell. It would, however, take a further 2 years for the final remnants to be driven out of the eastern portion of Angmar. And just 4 years later, the Balrog would be awoken in Khazad-dûm, leading the dwarves to be exiled from their home. Despite the downfall of Angmar and the Witch King fleeing south, Gundabad would remain under Orcish control. However, 800 years later, the dwarves would return in a fight for Gundabad. By 2770 of the Third Age, the dwarves have been exiled yet again, this time from Erebor by the dragon Smaug. Under King Thror, the grandfather of Thorin Oakenshield, they would settle in Dunland, where they would attempt to make a home for the next 20 years. However, Thror longs to see the ancient home of his people, leaving with a single companion and coming to the east gate of Khazad-dûm. There he is famously killed by the orcs of Moria, his body thrown down the steps, with his severed head branded with the name of their chieftain, Azog. Enraged by the death of their king, the dwarves of Durin's folk swear vengeance.
I have to say, though, kind of crazy to go there by yourself. I mean, maybe he didn't think it was under, like, orc occupation to that extent, and he thought he'd be fine, but holy shit, you're gonna go there by yourself? Like, if you ever did get captured by these guys, he'd have to know that he's donezo, right? Like, come on, man. What a way to go.
By the death of their
Or did he just not care at that point, you know?
The dwarves of Durin's folk swear vengeance. Once again, dwarves of all 7 clans would band together and take the fight to the orcs. 3 years after Thror's death, the dwarven host is assembled and prepared for war. They would begin not by attacking the orcs in Moria, but in Gundabad. This second sacking of Mount Gundabad results in the dwarves destroying all orcs they could find in the sacred mountain. Over the following 6 years, the dwarves would make their way south, attacking and sacking one by one every orc stronghold they could find. The war would be waged almost entirely underground beneath the Misty Mountains, all the way to Khazad-dûm. The dwarves would ultimately be victorious, with Dane Ironfoot killing and beheading Azog, avenging their fallen king. However, with the continued presence of the Balrog, Khazad-dûm could not be resettled. As for Gundabad, while it was rid of orcs at the beginning of this 6-year war, the dwarves' march through the Misty Mountains meant it would lie abandoned. Either during this very war or after its end in 2799,
they just moved right back in.
The Misty Mountains would return, once
God.
again making it their chief fortress and stronghold. This very civilization of orcs would come into play once again against the dwarves. In 2941, the company of Thorin Oakenshield enters the Misty Mountains after leaving Rivendell. During their escape from captivity, Gandalf kills the Great Goblin, the chieftain of the orcs of Goblin Town. It's possible that the Great Goblin was actually the leader of all the orcs of the Misty Mountains. As such, the orcs are enraged at the death of their chief, and they gather at Mount Gundabad.
That does make sense, kinda.
They are led by Bolg, the son of Azog. After hearing of the death of Smaug, Bolg and his army marches upon the Lonely Mountain. While they would take the bickering dwarves, elves, and men by surprise, the orcs would ultimately be decimated in the Battle of 5 Armies. All told, it is said that 3/4 of the goblin warriors of the north were killed in the battle. Gundabad would continue to be an orcish realm. However, due to the Battle of 5 Armies, it and the orcs of the Misty Mountains as a whole would be greatly diminished throughout the remainder of the Third Age. After this, we are told nothing else of Mount Gundabad. We know that over time, the dwarves of Erebor would expand. Gimli founds the glittering caves at Helm's Deep, and eventually they would reclaim their great ancestral home of Khazad-dûm. Whether Gundabad itself would ever return to dwarven control, we can only guess. This sacred awakening place of Durin the Deathless would be remembered as one of the locations fought over by the dwarves and their underground enemies, the orcs. Our next realm is one of the longest enduring settlements of the dwarves, starting in the First Age and re-emerging in the Third Age. Though greatly reduced in size and power, it is the realm of the Blue Mountains. In the shaping of Middle-earth, we learn the origin of the Ered Luin, or Blue Mountains. After Melkor destroys the 2 lamps, the Valar travel west to make their new home of Valinor. In an effort to protect Valinor from attack, they thrust Middle-earth farther away from their new land. As a result, 4 ranges of mountains are formed in Middle-earth, including the Blue Mountains. During their days in Valinor, the Vala Aule would travel to the darkness of Middle-earth, where he would create the 7 fathers of the dwarves and their spouses. After being confronted by Iluvatar, Aule would be made to set his children to sleep beneath the various mountains of the world. 2 of these couples Aule would place in the Blue Mountains. These dwarves, known as the Broadbeams and Firebeards, would be the westernmost of all clans of the dwarves, and the only dwarves to take part in the events of the First Age. Sometime after the awakening of the elves in the year of the trees 1050, the dwarves scattered across Middle-earth would wake in their mountain homes. The Firebeards and Broadbeams would found 2 great dwarf cities within the Blue Mountains, Belagos to the north and Nogrod to the south. In the year of the trees 1250, these dwarves would first enter the lands of Beleriand and meet the Sindarin elves. Together, the elves and the dwarves of Belagos would build the city of Menegroth in King Thingol's realm of Doriath. Menegroth would be remembered as a remarkable underground fortress. Indeed, its very name means 1,000 caves. In exchange for their help, the dwarves are rewarded with knowledge from Melian, as well as the Great Pearl Nymphelos, which the chieftain of the dwarves prized above a mountain of wealth. This was good, as the dwarves, though unwearied,
is there something powerful about that, or is it just
were known
extremely
to expect
rare
payment for their toil? In the First Age, we find both Nogrod and Belagos would trade with the elves, specifically the Sindarin elves of Doriath. They would even have a road made as a route for this trade. Simply known as the Dwarf Road, it would run from the mountains between the 2 cities, west along the north of the Asgar River, before crossing the Gelion at Sarn Athrad. Though they are often referred to together, the dwarves of Nogrod and Belagos have quite different reputations and histories. Nogrod, which translates to hollow delving, is particularly known for its craftsmanship, having some of the greatest smiths of the First Age. One such smith is Gamel Zarak, whose work was said to be well represented in the treasuries of Thingol. Zirak the Old student was Telkar, who would eclipse his master in achievement. Telkar would forge the knife Angrist, which Beren would use to pry a Silmaril from Morgoth's iron crown. He would also create the famed Dragon Helm of Dorlomin, and the sword Narsil, the very blade used by Elendil of Numenor and later reforged for Aragorn. Meanwhile, when it came to Belagos, which means Great Fortress, it is known to typically have better relations with the elves, and the divide between such relations would only become greater with dark deeds to come. The dwarves of Belagos would not only be friendly with the Sindar, but also the Noldor, whom they first meet when the sons of Feanor and their people come to Mount Rerir. Indeed, it was another of the Noldor that the dwarves of Belagos, and possibly those of Nogrod, would assist in the building of a new realm in 102 of the First Age. This elf was none other than Galadriel's brother, Finrod. In the Silmarillion, we are told, in that labor Finrod was aided by the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, and they were rewarded well, for Finrod had brought more treasures out of Tirion than any other of the princes of the Noldor, and in that time was made for him the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves, most renowned of their works in the Elder Days. Not only did the dwarves of the Blue Mountains get great riches for their work in delving yet another great elven city, but they also gave to Finrod a masterwork of their race, the Nauglamir. Finrod would also receive a new name from the dwarves, leading him to be called Felagund, meaning maker of caves. When it comes to these first-age dwarves,
Pretty high honor for the
there are
dwarves,
very
I have to
few
say.
known by name. Aside from the great smiths of Nogrod, the most notable is Azagal, who was the Lord of Belagost. One day, while traveling on the Dwarf Road in East Beleriand, Azagal is attacked by orcs.
Oh shit.
Fortunately, he is aided by Maithros, the eldest son of Feanor. For his help, Azagal gives to Maithros a great helm, none other than the dragon helm made by Telkar. Azagal and
They
the
seem to have
Belagost
great
dwarves
relations
would
here, the
remain
dwarves and the
allies
elves,
of
working
the
together
Noldor,
really well.
And in 468, he would join the Union of Maithros. This alliance is organized by the sons of Feanor to make a great war upon Morgoth, and features elves and men from across the lands of Beleriand. 4 years later, when the battle is fought, the dwarves would take part in the Eastern Campaign, joining the elves and Easterlings. While some of the Easterlings would betray the army, the dwarves would remain fiercely loyal to Maithros. As the battle becomes a disaster, Azagal and his people aid the elves in their retreat, standing firm against the very worst of Morgoth's forces, the dragon Glaurung.
Jesus.
Last of all the eastern force to stand firm were the dwarves of Belagost, and thus they won renown, for the Naugrim withstood fire more heartily than either elves or men, and it was their custom moreover to wear great masks in battle, hideous to look upon, and those stood them in good stead against the dragons. And but for them, Glaurung and his brood would have withered all that was left of the Noldor. But the Naugrim made a circle about him when he assailed them, and even his mighty armor was not foolproof against the blows of their great axes. And when in his rage Glaurung turned and struck down Azagal, Lord of Belagost, and crawled over him, with his last stroke Azagal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. Then
Really?
the dwarves raised up the body of Azagal and bore it away, and with slow steps they walked behind, singing a dirge in deep voices, as it were a funeral pomp in their country, and gave no heed more to their foes, and none dared to stay them. While the dwarves of Belagost would be
So I have to say too, that's damn. So they not only held the line, allowed the elves to kind of retreat, fall back. Same with the men there as well, and the loyalist forces of men there. But they also, well, the leader at least managed to actually not slay the dragon, not necessarily win the battle, but force a retreat by the enemy. I'm still sure they took catastrophic losses as well as the loss of their leader there as well. But like, damn, still got to give them credit where it's due. Like, absolute fucking G's. They didn't run, they didn't retreat. They held for everyone else so that they could retreat, and that's pretty baller, I have to say.
and none dared to stay them. While the dwarves of Belagost would be remembered for their incredible bravery, the dwarves of Nogrod would soon become infamous among the Sindar. Years before the disastrous battle which saw Azagal fall, Beren and Luthien had succeeded in stealing a Silmaril. This great jewel had been delivered to King Thingol of Doriath. Thingol then seeks out the very craftsmen who aided in creating his great city, the dwarves of Nogrod. He tasks the dwarves with combining the Silmaril with a wondrous necklace of countless gems, the Nauglamir. This great necklace, made by the dwarves' own hands, was brought out of the ruins of Nargothrond to Thingol. The dwarves, like Thingol himself, become enamored of the beauty of these pieces. They succeed in combining them into a wondrous necklace, but refuse to give it to Thingol, instead declaring that the Elf King had no right to the Nauglamir, for it had been made for Finrod alone and had been stolen from Nargothrond. Thingol responds in anger. "How dare ye of uncouth race dare to demand aught of me, Elu Thingol, Lord of Beleriand, whose life began by the waters of Quivian and years uncounted ere the fathers of the stunted people awoke? And standing tall and proud among them, he bade them with shameful words be.
I was gonna say, little underhanded by the dwarves there, and by little I mean a lot. Like, yeah, he straight up brought it to them. He's like, hey, yeah, I got this great piece. Your race gave this to my race. Now, not necessarily to me, but you gave it, like your race did give it to mine. I would like you guys to touch it up a little bit, add this nice jewel. Okay, sick, we can do that for you. Yeah, no problem at all. We got you. They take it, they do it. Actually, we like the way this looks. Also, it wasn't given to specifically you, and we made it originally, so we're just gonna keep it now. Even though, like, you know, you had hands on it and gave it to us in trust, you know? So that's very, very underhanded, I will say, by those dwarves there.
And standing tall and proud among them, he bade them with shameful words be gone unrequited out of Doriath. The lust of the dwarves is then kindled into a rage by the words of Thingol, and they slew the king where he stood.
Really?
Making off with the prize Nauglamir, the dwarves flee eastward.
That's
but
crazy.
Are pursued and killed by the elves of Doriath. The Nauglamir is returned to Menegroth, while 2 surviving dwarves return home to Nogrod. There the dwarves weave a tale of the elven king cheating them of payment and ordering them killed. Nogrod gathers a great host and sends word to Belagost, asking them to join. Belagost refuses. Thus the host of Nogrod marches alone into Doriath to the very caves of Menegroth. Both elves and dwarves would suffer heavy losses in the battle in the 1,000 caves. Ultimately, the Nauglamir would be taken by the dwarves.
Really?
And one of the elves' greatest warriors, Mablung of the Heavy Hand, would be slain.
Really?
As the dwarves make their way back to Nogrod,
I definitely
with
thought
great
the elves had
treasures
that
taken
one.
from Menegroth, word comes to Baron, who travels north with a company of green elves, ambushing the dwarves near Sarn Athrad. Once again, there are surviving dwarves who make their way east in hopes of escape. These hopes are quickly dashed as they climb the slopes of Mount Dolmed, where a group of Ents drive the dwarves into the forest, where all would perish. As he lay dying, the Lord of Nogrod curses the treasure of Doriath. Thus Baron casts all the treasure into the Ascar River, all
Really?
save the Nauglamir. This necklace would for a time be worn upon the neck of Luthien, and would later bring much pain and death to the elves in tales told elsewhere. As for the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, the next we hear of them comes in the devastation of the War of Wrath. As Beleriand is nearly completely destroyed, we are told that both dwarven cities of Nogrod and Belagost are ruined in the tumult. As a result, roughly 40 years into the Second Age, we are told the surviving dwarves would make their way eastward, joining with the Longbeards of Khazad-dûm. Thus,
Right,
3
right.
clans of the dwarves would dwell in this greatest of dwarven realms, leading Khazad-dûm to its pinnacle. For the dwarves of Nogrod and Belagost would bring with them lore and craft they had both discovered for themselves and learned from the elves. Still, it would seem the dwarves did not completely abandon the Blue Mountains, for we are told in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings that dwarves still dwelt in the eastern side of the Blue Mountains, especially south of the Gulf of Lune. These settlements had
So they never
mines,
really left
and the dwarves
necessarily.
would often traverse the road through Arnor, no doubt going to their kin in the Misty Mountains. As for the northern part of the Blue Mountains, we are told that the last king of Arnor, Arvedui, would hide in the old dwarf mines prior to his death in the Ice Bay. It is likely these were indeed abandoned mines, as Arvedui is eventually forced north out of hunger, seeming to indicate there were no dwarves in these northern mines. The next and perhaps most well-known of the events in the Blue Mountains would come late in the Third Age. Over centuries, the dwarves of Khazad-dûm would be displaced time and again. First by the Balrog in Moria, then by dragons in the Grey Mountains, then by Smaug in Erebor. It is the last of these which lead Durin's folk to temporarily settle in the lands of Dunland. After a war of vengeance against the orcs of the Misty Mountains, King Thrain would lead his people to the Blue Mountains in 2802, becoming the first kingdom in the Blue Mountains for over 6,200 years. Notably, this would mean that very few dwarves would live in the Blue Mountains during the time an elven realm existed around them. For the duration of the Second Age, the kingdom of Lindon would be a vital location for the Free Peoples. But by the time Thrain reestablishes a major settlement in the arid Luin, Lindon has been reduced to a small realm of elves at the Grey Havens. For 39 years, Thrain would rule his people in the Blue Mountains before he leaves with a company determined to return to Erebor. On this journey, the king would go missing, captured and imprisoned in Sauron's fortress of Dol Guldur. The kingship passes to his son, Thorin Oakenshield. Under Thorin's rule, the dwarves of the Blue Mountains would prosper, yet the years lengthened. The embers in the heart of Thorin grew hot again, as he brooded on the wrongs of his house and of the vengeance upon the dragon that was bequeathed to him. He thought of weapons and armies and alliances, and his great hammer rang in the forge. But the armies were dispersed and the alliances broken, and the axes of his people were few, and a great anger without hope burned him, as he smote the red iron on the anvil. One day, as he is traveling west back to his home in the Blue Mountains, Thorin has a chance meeting with Gandalf the Grey at the Prancing Pony in Bree. This meeting, taking place on March 15th, 2941, would lay the foundation for their great quest. The two agree to travel together, with Thorin saying to the wizard,
I have much on my mind, and they say you are wise and know more than most of what goes on in the world. Will you come home with me and hear me, and give me your counsel?
To this Gandalf agreed, and when they came to Thorin's hall, he sat long with him and heard all the tale of his wrongs. From Thorin, Gandalf would learn of the king's grand plans of battle and war against the dragon. Knowing this to be a fool's errand, Gandalf leaves and travels to the Shire, where he checks in on a hobbit he remembered from years past, Bilbo Baggins, who was now known for going off for days at a time and could be seen talking to strangers, even dwarves. After a brief encounter where Bilbo talks of trying to go see elves, an inspired Gandalf returns to Thorin, hoping to convince him to abandon plans for war in favor of secrecy. Ultimately, it is the map and key Gandalf had received from Thrain that convinced Thorin to go through with Gandalf's strategy. Thus, after nearly 100 years of rule in the Blue Mountains, Thorin would finally set out to take Erebor back from Smaug, while Thorin himself would fall in battle.
And it was 100 years. That's a long-ass time. In the movies, you really don't get that impression that that's how long it was, I have to say. Like, damn.
Or back from Smaug. While Thorin himself would fall in battle, Erebor was ultimately reclaimed, and Thorin's cousin, Dane Ironfoot, ascends to the throne. The Lonely Mountain once again becomes the capital of Durin's folk. And while it is believed many dwarves of the Blue Mountains would relocate to Erebor, some of their people would continue to dwell in Thorin's Hall in the Blue Mountains. It would seemingly continue to operate as a settlement under the greater rule of Erebor. We are told that dwarves would travel the east-west road through the Shire to go back and forth to the mines of the Blue Mountains. By the time of The Lord of the Rings, these dwarves were said to have been the Hobbits' chief source of news from distant parts, if they wanted any, of course. For as a rule, dwarves said little, and hobbits asked no more. As far as their trade habits, we don't get a complete picture, though dwarves may very well have traded with the men of Bree, and even traveled with goods onward to Erebor. Not only were these dwarves known for the riches they mined and their smithy work, but during the glory days of Erebor, their toy market in Dale was a wonder to behold. Closer to the Blue Mountains, however, we are told in the prologue of The Lord of the Rings that the hobbits of the East Farthing would wear dwarf boots in muddy weather. Interestingly, there are also 3 dwarves who help Bilbo Baggins move from Bag End when he leaves for Rivendell. As
really?
they are unnamed in the final text, it is unlikely they were among the original company of Thorin Oakenshield. In an earlier version of the text, there were actually 4 dwarves aiding him, and their names are listed as Nar, Anar, Lofar, and Hanar. We cannot say for certain, but it's possible these dwarves were either from the Blue Mountains or from Erebor. In the days leading up to the War of the Ring, Frodo Baggins
I wonder
was
why
said
there's
to
some
have
more
often met
information on
dwarves
them.
from far countries, seeking refuge in the West. This refers to the 4 clans of the dwarves who lived in the lands of Rhûn, for they spoke of the enemy and the land of Mordor. And it is likely that these dwarves would join with Durin's folk in the Blue Mountains. If this is indeed the case, it is possible that the Ered Luin would ultimately be home to dwarves descending from all 7 of the great clans.
That's pretty
While
cool.
much would change after Sauron's defeat, including another new realm founded by Gimli, dwarves would continue to dwell in the east side of the Blue Mountains as they had for the previous 2 centuries. Through both friendship and bloodshed with elves, destruction, refounding, and amidst the rise and fall of other dwarven lands, the Blue Mountains would remain a place for the dwarves of Middle-earth to call home. Next, we look at one of the newer realms of the dwarves, though ironically one of the first ever published by Tolkien, the
Really?
Kingdom of Erebor. While the Lonely Mountain wouldn't become a kingdom until well into the Third Age, we know that the dwarves
So this is
of
what the
Durin's
Hobbit is
folk
based
had
off of.
control over the mountain during the early Second Age at the latest. They also had control of the nearby Iron Hills as an
Right.
additional settlement of their people. The mountain would take on a much more important role after the fall of Khazad-dûm to the Balrog in 1981 of the Third Age. With both Durin VI and his son Nain I killed by the Balrog, the kingship of Durin's folk passes to Thrain I. Thrain leads a group of his people in their exile from Moria to the Lonely Mountain. There, the dwarves dig halls and caves in order to create an underground city. Thus, the kingdom under the mountain is born in 1999 of the Third Age. As Thrain I rules his people as the first king under the mountain, the dwarves discover riches within the rock, including the Arkenstone. The increasing wealth of Erebor leads men to found their own settlement between the slopes of the mountain. Thrain I dies in 2190 of the Third Age, passing
Right.
the kingship to his son, Thorin I. Now,
Right.
real quick, it's important to note these are not the Thrain and Thorin of the Hobbit tale.
No.
Those dwarves are the second of their names, whereas
They
these
come a
are
lot
the
later.
first.
Yeah.
Thorin I would rule as king under the mountain for 20 years, before making a huge decision for his people. They would abandon the Lonely Mountain. In the aftermath of Khazad-dûm's fall, Erebor was not the only location the dwarves fled to. Most notably, a great number of dwarves settled in the arid Mithrin, the Grey Mountains north of Mirkwood. Thorin I hoped to reunite Durin's folk, as well as take advantage of the mountains themselves, which were largely unexplored and richer for mining. They leave Erebor, which would remain a much smaller settlement for the dwarves, and make their way to the arid Mithrin. For well over 300 years, the dwarves of Durin's folk would prosper in their capital, now in the Grey Mountains. However,
Okay.
a great and terrible threat would come, one that would plague them for many long years: dragons. As Tolkien says in Appendix A, but there were dragons in the wastes beyond, and after many years they became strong again and multiplied, and they made war on the dwarves and plundered their works. In 2570 of the Third Age, the dragons from the northern waste make war upon the dwarves.
Yeah, it was
What is
multiple
notable
dragons
is that
came.
for 20 long
Like, it wasn't just smog. Like, if I recall, there was quite a few dragons that came and, like, absolutely plundered and ransacked the Dwarven Kingdoms, and there really wasn't much they could actually do about it. Because obviously they're dragons, right? And when they come on force, right, you lose stronghold after stronghold, kingdom after kingdom after that, right? It's like, damn. what do you really have to do? Like, you have to muster forces from across the continent to bring them over here. And even then, it's like those houses are now putting their forces at risk across the continent against a fucking nigh unbeatable enemy, probably. So it's a risk for sure. And what do you really do, you know?
Waste make war upon the dwarves. What is notable is that for 20 long years, the dwarves would hold out against this mighty foe. Like
Really?
the dwarves of the First Age fighting against the dragons of Morgoth, the dwarves show it is possible to withstand such a mighty foe for a time. However, in 2589, the dragons attack the very halls of King Dane I. Both the king and his second son are killed by a great cold drake. That is, a dragon that cannot breathe fire. With the death of the king, most of the dwarves abandon the Grey Mountains in the following year. The kingship is now passed to Thror, the grandfather of Torren II, Oakenshield. He leads his people back to Erebor with the Arkenstone in hand, re-establishing the kingdom under the mountain. Thror's younger brother,
Can't believe
Gror,
that.
leads
Well,
another group.
I guess it makes sense they went to the Grey Mountains because it was richer, but it's just surprising they left for so long. You know, and I'm sure they didn't leave. I'm sure there was still a settlement there growing, whatever have you, maybe under a different administration. But from what we see in the Hobbit movies, beautiful fucking place, I have to say. Very, very rich place, too. And I guess that's where the Arkenstone was originally mined anyway. So plenty of wealth there. I'm shocked they almost went north. That going north is almost seems to be what drew the ire of the dragons to begin with.
Kingdom under the mountain.
Or do you think they
Thror's
would have
younger
came
brother,
anyway?
Gror leads another group to the nearby Iron Hills, establishing a lordship for this long-held dwarven settlement. Erebor once again becomes the capital of Durin's folk, and over the next 200 years, the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain would become the greatest smiths in Wilderland. Both Erebor and the Iron Hills would prosper greatly, as would their closest neighbor. The settlement of men in the valley of the mountain would become a great
Lake
city,
Town.
the city of Dale. The men of Dale,
Dale.
and the
Oh,
dwarves
wait.
of Erebor
There's Dale and then there's Lake Town, right? Lake Town is further away, and Dale, I think, in the Hobbit is like ruined, isn't it? Or it's like, at least it's depopularized because of the dragon, I believe, right?
would have a great friendship, and both would prosper greatly in the years to come.
If I
However,
recall.
this would not last. A familiar foe would come to wreak havoc upon the people of this land.
See if I'm
A
right.
dragon. This was not any mere dragon. It was Smaug, the greatest fire-breathing dragon of all the Third Age. Smaug had heard of the wealth of Erebor, and in his lust for riches, one night in 2770, he descends upon the Lonely Mountain, bringing fire and death. Then he came down the slopes, and when he reached the woods, they all went up in fire. By that time, all the bells were ringing in Dale, and the warriors were arming. The dwarves rushed out of their great gate, but there was the dragon waiting for them. The river rushed up in steam, and a fog fell on Dale, and in the fog the dragon came on them and destroyed most of the warriors. With the warriors of both dwarves and men mostly destroyed, Smaug returns to Erebor, routing the remaining dwarves and driving out any survivors. We are told Smaug then amasses a pile of gold within the mountain, which is now his. The kingdom under the mountain is no more, and the dwarves are once again exiled. All told, the death toll of the sack of Erebor is in the thousands. Most of the
Millions.
dwarven survivors escape to the Iron
Holy
Hills,
shit.
joining Gror's people. Thror, his son Thrain II, and grandson Thorin II would lead the others in their exile. These wanderings would lead to Thror's death and a war with the orcs of the Misty Mountains, before Thrain leads his people to settle in the Blue Mountains west of the Shire. As for Smaug, he would only occasionally exit the mountain over the next 2 centuries to feed. We are told he would carry away people, especially maidens of Dale, to eat, as well as
really?
continue his destruction of the city. This leads to the total abandonment of Dale, with the
Right,
survivors
right.
living in Esgaroth upon the Long Lake, also known as Lake Town.
Lake
Their
Town.
former home and the lands around both Erebor and Dale come to be known as the Desolation of Smaug. and there was neither brush nor tree, and only broken and blackened stumps, to speak of the ones long vanished. This would of course not be the end of Erebor, however. With the help of the wizard Gandalf, Torren II Oakenshield, now king of his people, organizes the Quest of Erebor, an effort to reclaim their homeland. For his part, Gandalf knew that Smaug would almost certainly ally with a resurgent Sauron and cause mass destruction in the north of Middle-earth. The company would of course come to Erebor itself after many adventures. During their time in Erebor, we learn that the southwestern spur of the mountain contains a dwarven guard post called Ravenhill, where the birds of its namesake dwelt, and from which they would carry messages for the dwarves. We also learn of the Back Door, a secret entrance on the western side of the mountain, which led to the bottommost cellar of the Dwarven Halls. Similar to the West Gate of Moria, this door was invisible from the outside, though this door would only become noticeable with the setting sun, or the last light, of Durin's Day, which would shine upon the keyhole. This door would not only lead Bilbo and Thorin's company into the mountain, but it was also the way that Thror and Thrain had escaped Smaug's attack. After learning that Bilbo must have been helped by the Lakemen, Smaug leaves the mountain seeking to destroy them. He comes in a reckless rage, taking no heed of any that may resist him, but seeking only to set the town ablaze. In this moment, Bard the Bowman, ancestor of Lord Girion of Dale, turns to his black arrow. The dragon swooped once more lower than ever, and as he turned and dived down, his belly glittered white with sparkling fires of gems in the moon, but not in one place. The great bow twanged. The black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast, where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barb, shaft, and feather. So fierce was its flight. With a shriek that deafened men, felled trees, and split stone, Smaug shot spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed down from on high in ruin. Full on the town he fell. His last throws splintered it to sparks and gleeds. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth. With the death of the dragon, Thorin and his company retake Erebor and the treasure within. He is now officially...
It is quite based at just a regular ass human, quote unquote, right? Now, obviously the descendant of a lord, but just a regular guy. Just a good ass shot. Took that motherfucker down, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, Smaug was already weakened. You know, he was missing that plating in his belly there. And yeah, he just fucking crack shot with a bow there and fucking sunk it right in him there, man. Pretty based.
Thorin and his company retake Erebor and the treasure within. He is now officially king under the mountain, and the Lonely Mountain belongs to the dwarves once more. However, the peace would be short-lived. Thorin succumbs to dragon sickness, an immense greed brought on by treasure upon which a dragon has long brooded. In his sickness, Thorin refuses to give any of the reclaimed treasure in compensation for the destroyed lake town. Along with the elves of Mirkwood, the men place Erebor under siege. The conflict nearly becomes a full-on battle with the arrival of Thorin's cousin, Dane Ironfoot, now Lord of the Iron Hills. However, Gandalf intercedes and warns that goblins and wargs from the Misty Mountains and Grey Mountains are marching upon them. Agreeing that the orcs are the enemies of all, the elves, men, and dwarves join forces, and the battle of 5 armies begins. The goblins, wargs, and bats would be defeated in the end, thanks in large part to the late arriving Great Eagles and Beorn. However, Thorin and his sister sons and heirs, Kili and Fili, would die from the battle. Dane Ironfoot takes up the kingship of Durin's folk, and over the coming decades, would return Erebor to its lost glory. In addition to returning wealth and prosperity, they would build great towers upon the mountain itself and dig roads deep underground. With the returning prosperity of the dwarves comes the returning prosperity of their mannish neighbors. Dale is re-established as its own kingdom, with Bard himself becoming its first ever king. The men would commonly be known as Bardings. in affection
Based?
for their first ruler. Despite the renewed glory of their realms, both dwarves and men would face a
New culture
threat
type,
with the
Barding's
coming
unlocked?
War
Like what?
of the Ring. In 3018 of the Third Age, an emissary from Sauron comes to Dane, seeking the location of Bilbo and his ring. Dane turns the messenger away and sends Glóin and Gimli to Rivendell to warn Bilbo that Sauron was seeking him. Months later, King Brand, the grandson of Bard, holds an invading army of Easterlings at the river Carnan for a time, but is eventually driven back. And on March 14, 3019, the Battle of Dale begins. A combined force of men and dwarves march out to meet the Easterlings at the feet of the mountain. For 3 days, the armies take part in bloody, close-quarters combat. On March 17th, King Brand is killed, and Dane fights to his last breath, defending the body of his friend. With their king slain, the men and dwarves retreat into the mountain. Led now by their princes, Bard II and Torren III Stonehelm, they withstand the ensuing siege
Bard
of
II.
Erebor. For 10 days, they are made to hold out against Sauron's northern army. On the 8th day, March 25th, the One Ring is destroyed, along with Sauron's southern forces. Seeing the morale of their foes fall with the news from the south, Torren and Bard lift the siege on March 27th, driving the Easterlings out of Dale and back to Rhûn. With the victory, Torren Stonehelm is officially crowned the 6th Dwarven King under the mountain, and Bard II becomes King of Dale. They each send ambassadors to the coronation of King Aragorn Elessar, and would remain in friendship with Gondor. From that moment onward, both Erebor and Dale would fall under the protection of the High King of the reunited kingdom. We are told that both realms would continue to prosper well into the Fourth Age, even after Khazad-dûm is reclaimed by Durin VII, sometime after the year 171. Finally free from the threat of dragons and Sauron, Erebor and Dale are left to prosper in both wealth and friendship.
Finally, no Dwarven Realm video would be complete without mentioning the most mysterious realm, or the one that would be founded latest. First, the realm, or realms, that are the most mysterious are no doubt those of the Dwarves of Rhûn. Ironically, these lands were the home of 4 out of the 7 Dwarven clans. Like the Firebeards and Broadbeams of the Blue Mountains, these clans awoke in pairs. The Iron Fists and Stiffbeards, and the Blacklocks and Stonefoots. While we don't know exactly where they dwelt, we know that some of the earliest men would come into contact with dwarves during their time traveling around the Sea of Rhûn. Another likely location is the Orokarni, or Red Mountains in the east. We also know that by the end of the Third Age, many dwarves
wherever
would
there's
flee their
mountains,
lands
they could
of the
be
east, seeking refuge with their kin in the Blue Mountains. And as I recently discussed in its own in-depth video, there were dwarves likely in the east that actually served Sauron. As for the most recent of Dwarven realms, that honor goes to the realm of Gimli, son of Glóin. For after the War of the Ring, he would lead a group of dwarves from Erebor to the land of Rohan. Remembering the beauty of the caves behind Helm's Deep, he would, with the permission of King Éomer, establish a colony of Durin's folk loyal to King Thorin Stonehelm of Erebor. Thus, Gimli becomes the first Lord of the Glittering Caves. There, his people would carefully tend the stone walls, opening new passages and chambers, and hang lamps that filled these beautiful caverns with light. In addition to making a new realm, it is said these dwarves would perform great services for both Rohan and Gondor. Of particular note is their forging of new gates for the city of Minas Tirith, gates forged of steel and mithril. While it would be the youngest, we are told the Glittering Caves would also become one of the most important realms of the dwarves, and Gimli would rule as its lord until he sails west 120 years into the Fourth Age.
Throughout their history, the dwarves would experience great triumph and sorrow, victories and defeats, and some of the greatest and most epic wars to ever be fought. Tolkien's dwarves proved time and again to be a most hardy folk, and among the most iconic dwarves in all of literature and mythology.
Very true.
As always,
fantasy
I want
in
to say
general,
a huge
most
thank
iconic
you to
by
all
far.
my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Madame Director, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Z and N, Evely,
Of course.
Kia, Freya Firestar, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much
Awesome.
for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.
That was great, guys. That was, of course, the Dwarven Realms of Middle-earth compilation, Tolkien Explained by Nerd of the Rings. Big thank you, Fyr, for that recommendation, of course. And that was awesome to check out. Actually learn some more about the dwarves of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Because again, you know, we haven't checked out really many of the races. We've obviously seen some more of the elves. We know a little bit about the humans, but dwarves we were completely fucking clueless on. So it was awesome to check out actually all the dwarf kingdoms, at least what's known about them, and just to see like what they've been a part of. I think they're probably my favorite race, to be honest. I generally like dwarves in fantasy. My you know, personally, again, like the loot hoardingness, the fact that they're just usually the best smiths, what they can create architecturally is just beautiful to me. And they're just kind of G's, you know what I mean? They're goofy at times. They're funny. They got good songs. They got good storytelling. They're good combatants, you know. I don't know. Dwarves are just pretty base to me. I really enjoyed it. But I thought this video was great. Obviously, we're liked up. We're subscribed up. If you guys enjoyed this reaction, do the same. Like this video, subscribe for more content from me. And of course, leave recommendations down in the comments below what you guys want me to check out next. If you guys want me to see more, you guys want me to react to more Lord of the Rings content, of course, let me know. You know, I do love learning more about Lord of the Rings, and it's a fantastic literature. It's a fantastic universe that I do love learning more about. So of course I'm always willing to check out some more of it. And yeah, without any further delay, this has been Centurion. Big thank you to all of our members, all of our Hastati, our Triarii, our Principe, Dagenhart, and of course our Prefects Fyr and Hobbit. Appreciate you guys. And without any further delay, this has been Centurion. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.